So I like these early ones because I'm still a little bit drunk, so I'm just loosened up, so it'll be very nice. So, Eric, you make watches. Tell us about the Pebble smartwatch.
So Pebble,
the story, yeah, the basic story.
So Pebble's a watch that talks to your smartphone. It's a Bluetooth-enabled watch. It receives email, text messages, caller ID. But the really cool thing that we're working on with Pebble is how it can become more through apps. So people can write apps for Pebble, and it can kind of take on a life of its own. It can be a sports watch, it can be a dress watch, it could be a watch that shows you a 5-day weather forecast. Mm-hmm. We started working on it around 5 years ago, actually. I was studying engineering at the University of Waterloo.
And you had years of experience in making watches, right?
It is kind of weird because I don't think 5 years ago I would have been able to predict that I would be working on watches 5 years from then. So, I mean, we built the first one. It was literally just something that I wanted to have. Like, I wanted to be able to see what was happening on my phone while I was cycling. I commuted by bicycle. So we built this like Arduino prototype that had a lot of zap straps and was just kind of zap strapped to the wrist. Mm-hmm. Didn't really work too well as a watch. It had a lot of problems like short battery life and stuff like that. But when I showed it to people, people were like, that's cool. That's more than a project. That could actually become a product. And that's when I started gathering a team and building the product that we have today, 5 years later.
So I would be remiss if I didn't ask, for the record, what's the next Pebble going to look like? What's Pebble 2.0? You're just going to tell me that right now, and then we're just going to get that out of the way.
Straight up on stage.
Yeah.
So Pebble 2.0 is actually software. It's the idea that the watch hardware that we've built right now can be taken over and changed to suit any kind of different purpose using software. So we've opened up the platform a little bit to developers already, and there's about 1,000 apps that are available for Pebble today. The next step is inviting developers to just create more and more functionality on the wrist so that you don't have to buy a new watch. You can just use the existing Pebble you have, and it takes on a different shape.
But in terms of innovation, it's just going to be colors, different colors, right?
Yeah.
Different colored watches, and maybe fingerprint sensors.
Fingerprint sensors all over.
That'd be pretty badass.
Yeah.
So, $10 million, you raised $10 million to make this crazy watch. And how many, this is like 2 years ago or a year ago that you raised this?
A year and a half.
And how does it feel to go from zero, some dude with like leads strapped to his wrist, bicycling through Vancouver, to having $10 million that you have to actually do with? Well, and were you ever encouraged, did you ever feel that you needed to actually escape with that money to like Mexico or something?
No, the thought didn't cross my mind, but the thought of figuring out what we had to do was always present. I mean, we'd been working on the product for about 4 years by the time we launched on Kickstarter. But even then, we were still 3 or 4 guys in our living room in Palo Alto when we launched the project on Kickstarter. We had plotted out a couple different paths of like, what would it look like if we raised $100,000 on Kickstarter? And then in the crazy world, what if we raised $1 million on Kickstarter? And luckily, within the first 28 hours, we raised $1 million. Mm-hmm. And so we were able to immediately take that path towards manufacturing at a larger scale. Up until that point, we had manufactured about 1,500 units of our first watch at a small manufacturer in San Jose. And we were actually thinking of doing Pebble at the same factory. Like, we had gotten quotes, we had done pricing, we had done timelines. But then when it just took off on Kickstarter, we immediately had to kick into a different gear and figure out how we were going to make, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of this watch.
So how do you do that? Did you have to fly over to Shenzhen and just tell somebody you needed all these watches? What's the process? Because I mean, I'm sure there's software guys here who want to build hardware.
So it starts with prototypes. I mean, the most important thing that you can do is build the product and get it to work in some form, in some shape, using things that you can hack together. Like, we had an untold number of orders to SparkFun, which is like the coolest place to buy little bits of electronics. Like, the office was just stacked high with those red boxes from SparkFun. And that's how we put together the prototype, just completely off-the-shelf stuff. The cool thing about that was, since we chose components that we could buy off the internet, it was actually fairly easy to source those in larger quantities because, like, they exist, people are manufacturing them. We were buying them at a higher price. The price comes down when you go into volume. The harder part was assembly. So, like, the components of the watch straight off the shelf. But a lot of the problems that we ran into during the manufacturing process were related to things like waterproofing or things like colors of injection molding. these are things that we hadn't really predicted, and I think even if we had spent years and years and worked with experienced people, we probably would have seen some of these ahead of time, but a lot of these problems you just run into when you're going into manufacturing.
So do you guys sit there and did you have to look at every single watch before it came through? Did you have some kind of QA?
Yeah, no, I spent a lot of, I think one of our guys from Palo Alto was in China 24/7. Like we did 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and just alternated back and forth for about 8 months. And we were sitting at the end of the line checking the watches.
Because I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. This is a fairly human-intensive process. So you have the assembly, especially for a small piece like this. You have to have somebody close the case.
43 minutes of touch time creating each watch. So it is very intense. And also when you're doing something in a short term, like we had 8 months from our Kickstarter project to the time that we shipped the watch to our Kickstarter backers, and that's not a super large amount of time to set up an automated facility. We had a lot of processes that were done by hand.
And now just another piece of advice for just folks who are trying this. People on the internet are horrible. So you had a lot of problems with people complaining that the watch wasn't going to be ready, that it's vaporware. How did you deal with the vaporware claims? As it was sort of like, it was rising and then it kind of fell off, and then once you guys shipped, everybody was happy again.
So I was a big Kickstarter backer before we launched the project on Kickstarter. I think I've backed like 30 or 40 projects now. And one of my favorite things, even before we did our Kickstarter project, was getting the updates, was finding out what was the progress that had been made, what has been done. And so we really, I think we tried really hard to keep people updated through our Kickstarter blog posts. Every 2 to 3 weeks, we would post another video or photos or just progress that we had made. And we tried to convey that it was a hard problem that we were solving, that there were hurdles and there were issues that we were running into, and here's how we were getting around those issues. But at the same time, it took longer than we expected, and people, we had to answer to that. Okay.
So enough about the hard stuff. Let's talk a little bit more philosophically in terms of wearables. Why can't anybody crack the wearables market? I think you guys have done a very admirable job, and I'm a big Pebble fan. But I'm still wearing an automatic watch, and there's a few reasons for that. It's obviously the battery. I feel like the watch real estate is designed for telling time and not telling me that I have an SMS or whatever. But what is it about wearables that needs to be solved to make them truly ubiquitous?
I think it's mainly about the use case. I think that the hardware needs to kind of flow back into the background. And really, the reason why you should put a watch or a smartwatch or a wearable on your body is because it's useful, it solves a problem, and you can really appreciate it in your everyday life. It doesn't force you to change your life around the device. It just kind of meshes. And I think that it's kind of crazy because that's why I think Pebble took off last spring when we launched on Kickstarter, that we were able to eloquently describe 3 or 4 very clear use cases how people could use the watch for receiving SMS, email, for controlling music, and for being able to change the look and feel of the watch just by downloading a different watch face. So that was kind of like our message that the Kickstarter project carried. But it's crazy. I mean, like we've had competitors that have popped up over the last year and a half, and I'm sure there will be many more competitors to come in the next couple of months. But everyone kind of seems to ignore the reasons why I think our Kickstarter project and why Pebble took off.
So what do you think of the Samsung, the Gear, the crazy smartwatch that looks bigger than your wrist and all that?
Samsung launched a watch last week. Sony has had a watch on the market for the last 2 years. Motorola has been creating watches. Having competition in the smartwatch space is not new. I think, just like I had said before, that everyone's kind of ignoring the things that you need to do with a smartwatch. It needs to mesh into your life. It needs to have a long battery life. Pebble has a 5 to 7 day battery life. And it needs to just not, be annoying. You don't have to worry about it getting wet. You don't have to worry about it getting banged up. It's just, it just works in your life. And I think that a lot of the competitors, Samsung, for example, have created products that on paper seem to be, these over-spec'd, machines. But no one has really thought about how they fit into your life.
I mean, it seems like you need to be at a point where it's either a sort of a dumb terminal, which is what a lot of them are right now, and then they're also trying to make them into little PCs, like on your wrist, which is also sort of the other extreme. Like I think I backed one that has like a 2 gigahertz processor, and I don't know, it's all turns into a quadcopter or something like that. And it's, I don't know, $200, and God bless them, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't, but I'll see what happens. But everybody's either going to these two extremes, where it's a really dumb thing or a really smart thing. And what's the sweet spot? What needs to happen to make all the wearables work together and all the wearables be useful to people?
So our vision is slightly more catered towards the thin client approach. We think that the best computer you have is the one sitting on your pocket. It has a screen for interaction, it has a long battery life, and it has a 3G radio or a 4G radio. Pebble and smartwatches should be things that take advantage of that sitting in your pocket. Pebble should also take advantage of the other sensors and the other devices that you're wearing, that you have in your house, that you have around you. Pebble needs to be the platform that other people can bring interaction to, micro interactions or really, really small interactions. If you need to, control your thermostat, maybe the best place to do that is on your wrist. Or maybe if you want to, maybe you're using the new SF bike share and you want to find out where the nearest bike delivery point is. What if you can just, pull out your watch and just instantly have that information available to you? So I think we're more about having Pebble change to suit the activity that you're doing at that given time. So for example, right now if you go for a run and you use Runkeeper with Pebble, you open the Runkeeper app on your phone, your Pebble automatically takes on the best form, the sort of symbiotic form to work with your Runkeeper. You don't have to press a button on your watch, you don't have to open an app on your watch. It just works and it just starts. And I think that's the experience that we want to really sort of encourage.
So have you guys been able to get other sensors to work with the Pebble? So like the LumoBack, for example, it's like a strap that goes around your back. And for slobs like me, it makes me sit up a little bit better. And all those other things. Have you tried those specifically with the Pebble to make them?
We've been working with a couple different things. A couple of people have launched apps already. There's one that takes heart rate measurements from heart rate straps and pushes it to Pebble. I think LumoBack's an excellent startup. I've got one on the way. And I think that idea of there being a little bit of information that's best suited to be displayed on the wrist is exactly what we're going for.
When you get the LumoBack, you're going to find that it drives you crazy because we think we sit up straight, but I'm slouching like a weirdo up here, and when you put it on, it just keeps buzzing at me, and it was terrible.
My mom's a physio. I think she'd be really happy.
Yeah. Oh, that would be nice. So you guys can she can tell you that you're not slouching anymore.
Yeah, and now I can trust this thing to tell me.
So I mean, you were originally an engineer. You were a designer. What was it about watches, specifically smartwatches, that kind of drew you to solve this problem as opposed to like a taco copper problem that you were discussing earlier?
As cool as Taco Copter is, I think that I really like solving problems that people have on a daily basis. Like one of the really cool things about Pebble is that it's a watch, it's at the front of your life. And I know that when I see someone wearing it, it's because they really like it. Because if you didn't like it, you wouldn't put it on your wrist every day. So I really like the fact that we're working on products that people use on a daily basis, because it's very easy to evaluate if you're doing a good job or not.
Mm-hmm. And what does it take for a wearable to really take off? I mean, I guess you say use it on a daily basis, but then there's some kind of sweet spot that you guys have found that maybe other people have found as well. I haven't found a single watch that I like, but there's that sweet spot that you guys have clearly found. I mean, you got $10 million for the watches, so. What were you thinking just as you began working on these watches, and what was the design goal? I mean, this doesn't look like a watch. It looks more like a MP3 player / watch, which kind of does has a little screen on it. You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah. So when we started working on watches, we knew that everyone has a very personal style. For the watch is an aesthetic element, an aesthetic choice that you've made. There's not really one type of watch that's hit all consumers. There's big watches, there's small watches, there's colored watches, there's automatic digital. There's a broad variety. So when we started designing our first watch and when we designed Pebble, we actually chose to have the screen centered in as the main aspect of the design. And that's because by downloading an app, you can actually change the look of the watch. And so we wanted to make sure that that was the maximum point. That was what people were looking at when they looked at Pebble. The rest of the design kind of falls into the back, and on purpose to show off the screen. And I think that if we could make a watch that was just screen on the top, that would be amazing. Unfortunately, the technology is not there yet, but that would be the ultimate goal.
So what do you think an iWatch, like an Apple iWatch, would look like? What do you think those guys could pull off that you guys haven't been able to pull off for whatever reason? I mean, you have a fairly cool device, but everybody's going to say that they're going to crack it, and I'm not sure that they will. Do you think they will, Apple?
think it's very difficult to kind of predict what Apple may or may not do.
Okay, well, let's say if we had a Pebble 3.0, what would your ideal Pebble look like?
I think Pebble, like I said before, it's mainly about the screen, it's mainly about the technology and the software that drives it. So when we go about designing new products, we mainly think about what experience should the user have, or can the user have while they're using the product. Is it something that folds back into your life, just kind of like meshes, or is it something that stands out that is very kind of like obvious that you're wearing it? I think we're choosing a route where it is much more of something that integrates into your daily life.
And is it a watch itself? Could it be something else? Could it be like I don't know, the glass, all that other good stuff?
I think the watch is a great starting point. I think that it's kind of like a low-hanging fruit. It's already a spot on your body that people are fairly comfortable wearing technology.
Well, I have big thighs. We could just put something right here.
Or ankle bracelets.
An ankle bracelet.
Like definitely. Ankle computing might be the future. Yeah. So I think the watch is the point that we really liked because it was easy to get started at. The size constraints are fairly conducive to putting a little bit of technology in there, and it's already something that you can wear on your wrist and kind of have.
Okay. So I guess, in terms of best practices, let's help the guys who are doing Kickstarter projects now. Let's help all the other smartwatch guys be as successful as you. What would you recommend they do? What are some of the steps that you guys took specifically for your Kickstarter project to make it so amazing?
So the number one thing to remember is that Kickstarter is not a single touch point and you touch it and it explodes. Kickstarter in a lot of ways is similar to Craigslist. It's a page on the internet that people can browse to. The real value of Kickstarter, in my mind, is the fact that it's simplified. It's a single landing page. It's kind of like LaunchRock for a hardware company. If you can tell the story, if you can explain why someone should back your project, support your project, there's a single green button on the right that people hit. Mm-hmm. And there's only one action that you can do. And so if you can tell your story in 2 to 3 minutes and explain to people what you're working on well enough for them to click a button, then you've effectively completed the path. There's no click through, there's no sign up, it's just that one step. I think that's really important. I think that other people have seen that. There's several different crowdfunding platforms that have launched. My buddies over at Lockatron have actually built Self-Starter, which is a freestanding open source Kickstarter clone, and you can basically go off and make your own Kickstarter. Most recently, a company named Tile, which you guys might have seen on Facebook, have used Self-Starter, the platform, to raise like $2.5 million. So there's a lot of tools out there right now, but it all boils back to the point that you have to be able to explain what you're working on in a very concise manner.
And what did you guys do in terms of videos? And you had prototypes, obviously, but what do you think was compelling about your videos and your I guess your collateral, we could say, marketing collateral that made it successful?
So we up until Kickstarter, we were actually struggling to raise money. Like, we had gone through Y Combinator. We had not been able to raise money after Y Combinator. We were working on hardware in 2011. It was not a super hot time to be working on hardware. And we were down to the last, I think there was like $50,000 or $60,000 left in the bank. And we didn't really have that much money to be able to pull off some fancy marketing video or something like that. So we just filmed it ourselves. I borrowed a camera from a friend, and we recruited interns as well as friends from around the Bay to help film this video. But I think the reason why that actually served us well was because we knew about the product. We had been working on it. It wasn't someone else interpreting our vision and putting that into a video or something like that. It was actually us. We filmed it ourselves. We filmed it around the apartment, and we just did things that we knew the watch would kick ass at. Mm-hmm. And by being that close to the marketing, we didn't even look at it marketing at that point. It was just like a cool video, but it is marketing. And so by us being right there at the stage where we're creating the content, I think we had a really good perspective on what we were selling, what we were making.
So what you're basically saying is screw VCs and accelerators. They're all awful people. You should do it yourself. Is that right?
I wouldn't say that exactly, considering how much help we've received from both VCs and investors. I would say that if
there's a way around that, and you can solve these problems.
What I would say is, if you care about your product and you're proud of it and you want to tell people about it, then do the work to tell people about it. Figure out what are the 3 things that your product does that no one else can do, and then explain those in an eloquent manner. That's the hardest part. But once you can do it, that's where you can actually see see traction.
All right, excellent. So you guys are 30 people up in, where are you guys now?
We're in Palo Alto.
Palo Alto. So 30 people, so 0 to 30 in 2 years, which is amazing. You have a great watch, you have a great product. It's in Best Buy. How's it selling in Best Buy?
We were sold out for the first month in Best Buy. We're now back in stock in more of them. It was a bit of a whirlwind going from shipping 85,000 units to Kickstarter backers to starting to ship into a retailer.
If you told anybody 2 years ago that you'd be selling out smartwatches in Best Buy, they'd be, no, you can't do it. It's impossible. But now you can. So, thank you very much, Eric. This is amazing. I really love the watch. I'm going to start wearing it. Give this guy a round of applause. He built something amazing.